The National Desk, America's News Now.
The clock ticks down with no glimmer of hope for a Capitol Hill compromise. Is a government shutdown all but certain?
What is the logical next step?
Keep working and make sure we solve this problem.
Then the UAW strikes expand again. Up next, who was hit in this round and who was spared as one automaker hits back.
And I want to say to all New Yorkers, this is time for heightened alertness and extreme caution. If you are home, stay home. If you are at work or school, shelter in place.
New York underwater, the amount of rain that has drenched the tri-state area as warnings spread into tonight.
On this vote, the yeas are 198, the nays are 232. The bill is not passed.
The House failed to pass their measure today, and the Senate didn't even vote on their bill, agreed to in principle on Wednesday. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. The clock ticking down. In 30 hours, the federal government shuts down, and neither chamber has moved forward on a bill to keep it open. Frustrations are rising on Capitol Hill.
My Republican colleagues have refused to find ways to partner together far too often, and instead continue to double and triple down on their extremism.
There's only one person to blame for any potential government shutdown, and that's Matt Gaetz. He's not a conservative Republican, he's a charlatan.
You can see the clock there ticking down at the bottom right of your screen. The question is the government on the brink of a shutdown? We have national correspondent Janae Bowens tracking all the latest for us. Janae.
With the federal government on the verge of a shutdown, House Republicans are nowhere near a solution.
The Senate, to their credit, Democrats and Republicans are talking. You guys can't even talk with yourselves.
Instead of pursuing a bipartisan agreement on a short-term solution like the Senate, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is in a stalemate with a handful of hardliners within his own ranks and is now shifting blame to the White House.
Another reason for the stopgap is to address President Biden's historic failure on the southern border.
McCarthy pushed a spending bill that would include more funding for border security, something missing from the Senate bill. But it wasn't enough for his Republican critics.
The Republican border position has gotten weaker through this continuing resolution.
Gaetz says he's fed up with reckless government spending, which is why he won't support a short-term solution like the Senate's bill.
Oh, I'm not voting for a continuing resolution because since the 90s, our government has been funded by either a continuing resolution or an omnibus spending bill.
Because of the House GOP's slim majority, McCarthy faces a choice: continue to woo the hardliners or work with Democrats to keep the government open. Gaetz suggests the latter will be the end of McCarthy's speakership.
Speaker McCarthy cannot use Democrat votes to advance the spending priorities of Joe Biden and expect that he's going to remain the Republican speaker.
Many rank-and-file Republicans becoming frustrated with Gaetz stonewalling.
This has become a situation where the American people are going to be harmed because of one person, Matt Gaetz.
Meanwhile, the White House placing blame squarely at the feet of the GOP.
This is going to be the extreme part of the House, Republican. It's going to be their shutdown.
Now, Amira, if Congress can't figure this out, the government shuts down at 12:01 a.m. on Sunday morning. Now, federal agencies have already started telling their employees to prepare for a shutdown.
Wow, Janae, that deadline soon coming. What comes next? What should we expect?
Right, so they're still trying to work this out. The House is expected to vote tomorrow. We're hearing the plan is to vote on a short-term package that would fund the government for 14 days. The Senate is also expected to vote tomorrow. Amira?
A short-term fix is our only hope right now. Janae Bowens live in D.C. for us. Thank you so much. Tributes are pouring in for the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. She passed away at the age of 90, a woman of many firsts. She served in the Senate for more than 30 years. She was California's longest-serving senator and the longest-serving woman in the Senate. You can see here her desk on the Senate floor draped in black with white flowers on it per tradition. In a statement, President Biden calls Feinstein a pioneering American, a true trailblazer, and for he and the First Lady, a cherished friend. Leaders in the Senate, Democrat and Republican, paid their respects on Capitol Hill today.
As the nation mourns this tremendous loss, we're comforted in knowing how many mountains Diane moved, how many lives she impacted, how many glass ceilings she shattered along the way. America is a better place because of Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Diane was a trailblazer in her beloved home state of California, and our entire nation are better for her dogged advocacy and diligent service.
7,000 more members of the United Auto Workers Union are on the picket lines today. UAW President Shawn Fain targeted 2 new plants for the growing strike, now entering its 3rd week. Though spared a week ago, Ford was hit again, closing a plant in Chicago. Ford CEO Jim Farley called out this decision.
Whether Shawn Fain believes it or not, the UAW needs a healthy Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis to have a future. It's going to take compromise. It's going to take leadership to meet this moment.
Meantime, a GM factory near Lansing, Michigan was also the site of a walkout today. The UAW let Stellantis go without further work disruption, citing progress in the talks. But Fain said the union is not letting up.
We will not be intimidated into backing down by the companies or their scabs. Our cause is just, striking for a better future to protect our communities and to defeat corporate greed is not just our right, it's our duty.
Fain claims there have been incidents of violence against union members on the picket lines, including pulled guns and cars ramming through workers marching. Right now, more than 25,000 UAW workers, roughly 1/6 of the union members, have now stood up to strike. One of the 19 defendants in the Georgia election case has pleaded guilty, the first to enter a plea. Today, Scott Hall admitted to conspiracy to commit election fraud and conspiracy to commit computer theft, among other charges. Under a deal with Fulton County, Hall is being sentenced to 5 years of probation. The 27-year-long mystery of who killed Tupac Shakur, that is perhaps getting a little more clarity tonight. A game-changing break in a case that has both fascinated and perplexed the public. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was taken into custody this morning and charged with murder. Davis has long been known to investigators and, in fact, has admitted in a 2019 tell-all memoir that he was in the car that discharged those shots. Prosecutors say Davis was the on-site commander who ordered the death of Shakur. The charge comes 2 months after Las Vegas police raided the home of Davis's wife looking for evidence. And take a look at this major flooding happening in New York and New Jersey that started this morning, causing both states to issue a state of emergency. Parts of Connecticut also got soaked. A terminal at LaGuardia Airport remains closed after flooding there caused several flight delays. Today is the wettest day New York City has had since Hurricane Ida swept through the area in 2021. Some areas in Brooklyn recorded more than 6 inches of rain. Some could see 8 inches by the end of the day. And a travel advisory is in effect for New York City through 6 a.m. tomorrow. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today, a judge ruled that Ethan Crumbley, the teen who killed 4 at his Oxford, Michigan high school, was eligible for the sentence, despite only being 15 years old at the time of the shooting. That's the harshest penalty allowed in the state. The official sentence won't come down until December, after survivors and families can give statements to the judge. A trial now underway in the case against a Florida man accused of keeping his adopted teenage son in a box in his garage. Officials found the box in the home of Timothy and Tracy Verder after the couple reported their son missing. They're each being tried separately, and jury selection began today for Timothy. The couple was also expected to be arraigned today for an additional charge. Jury selection should be finished on Monday. For 25 years, TeForest Johnson has claimed he is innocent in the murder of Deputy William Hardy, who was working off-duty as a security guard. Now there are mounting voices calling for a retrial in his case. On Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court could agree to review the case. A denial would send it back to Jefferson County, where the district attorney favors a retrial. Former Alabama Attorney General Bill Baxley among those who believes Johnson is innocent.
With the lack of evidence on TeForest Johnson had gone this long and this far in our system. I still can't answer why, don't understand why. or how. Every day that goes by is a day where the injustice is being perpetrated because he's still locked up on death row.
Baxley says he believes in capital punishment, but says this error has to be corrected. There was no forensic or physical evidence tying Johnson to the crime. He had an alibi, and testimony from someone who was paid reward money has been called into question. Former NFL player Michael Orr is free from his conservatorship with Sean and Leanne Toohey. This after a judge granted his petition. The retired NFL star's life inspired the Oscar-nominated film The Blind Side, but in August, Orr revealed he signed the binding agreement back in 2004 and said he only realized later that he was, quote, tricked into doing so after being told there was no difference between a conservatorship and adoption. Orr says the family unfairly enriched themselves in the process. The Tooheys have called the claims hurtful and absurd. Coming up, we will dive into the latest numbers on inflation, GDP, and consumer sentiment to get an overall picture of how the economy is doing. Then, which military branch will start randomly testing its special operations forces for steroids? We'll be right back. And then what we know so far about new actions Texas could take in response to a surge of migrants at the southern border. Stay with us. The Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation saw a slight increase last month. The Commerce Department said today the personal consumption expenditures index was up 3.5% rather in August. That was up from 3.4% in July, and it was the second straight rise. The Federal Reserve is targeting a 2% inflation rate. Well, delving deeper into today's report, the numbers show the Federal Reserve's high interest rates are making progress in the fight to stabilize prices. However, there's still a long way to go. And national correspondent Achal Nashar breaks down this week's economic data and how it's affecting household budgets.
One of the measures of inflation the Federal Reserve watches closest just dropped to the lowest level in almost 2 years. But there are troubling signs beneath the surface. In August, the price index measuring goods and services purchased by households, excluding food and energy, was up 3.9% for the year, inching closer to the Fed's target rate of 2%. The Commerce Department data also shows incomes rose 0.4% for the month. Lael Brainerd, former vice chair of the Fed, who now serves as a top economist in the Biden administration, says all of this is encouraging.
Yes, I think there are risks to the economy. The economy, however, has proven remarkably resilient.
At the same time, consumers are pulling back their spending in a big way. Growth in August was less than half the rate it was in July, and as new GDP data shows us, was weaker than previously estimated during the entire second quarter. It goes hand in hand with a new reading on consumer sentiment by Morning Consult and Axios showing a dip among all income levels in September. Many economists, even Fed Chair Jerome Powell, blame high energy prices.
It really comes down to how persistent, how sustained these energy prices are.
The national average for a gallon of regular gas stood at $3.83 Friday, according to AAA, and it's averaged above $3.50 since February. Immediate pain at the pump that, over time, inflates prices of other commodities, helping to renew fears of stagflation, which is a period of stagnant growth and high inflation, usually coupled with a high unemployment rate. But the labor market remains strong and is expected to stay that way. In Washington, I'm Atrel Nishar reporting.
Asher, thank you. The toy store brand Toys R Us is making a U.S. comeback. The retailer's parent company, WHP Global, announced that as many as 24 brick-and-mortar stores will open by the end of the year. Most of those stores will be located in airports across the country. The first one opening will be in Terminal A at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport in November. Toys R Us declared bankruptcy in 2017 and had closed its last U.S.-based store back in 2021. And marking the end of a chapter for General Mark Miller at Milley, as you can see here, a final send-off today. The Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman honored with an Armed Forces farewell tribute this morning.
As Commander-in-Chief, I've relied on Mark's counsel because I know he always gives it to me straight, no matter what. I want to thank you for always seeing, always sharing the whole map with me.
And Milley became chairman in 2019 after serving as chief of the Army. His successor is General C.Q. Brown, the chief of staff of the Air Force. And starting in November, the Navy will randomly test Special Operations Forces for performance-enhancing drugs, including steroids. The Naval Special Warfare Command leader announced the change today. It'll be the first of any U.S. military Special Operations Group to do so. The Army said it will start a similar testing program. The Archdiocese of Baltimore files for bankruptcy days before a new state law removes the statute of limitations on child sex abuse. A statement on the Archdiocese website says this move is the best way to compensate survivors while the local Catholic Church continues its mission and ministries. Over 600 children were sexually abused by Catholic priests and others for over 8 decades in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. Starting Sunday, child sex abuse survivors in Maryland will be able to file civil lawsuits against their abusers. Social media in the hot seat. The Supreme Court has announced it will hear a pair of First Amendment challenges to social media platforms. In question is whether Florida and Texas can prohibit these companies from removing posts based on the views they express. The states have said removing posts is censorship. Tech companies have said such state laws in place would prohibit them from removing a lot of content, including hate speech. The Supreme Court is expected to make its ruling later next year. Meanwhile, for the first time ever, the courts have determined that the White House and top American agencies violated free speech tenets at the very heart of the U.S. Full Measure's Cheryl Atkinson reports.
How important do you see this case in terms of a free speech case?
This is the most important First Amendment case in a generation. I mean,
Andrew Bailey is Attorney General for Missouri, which filed the landmark censorship lawsuit against the Biden administration.
We're flagging problematic posts for
Jen Psaki from the White House press secretary's podium established and committed to making sure that big tech social media were clamping down on misinformation, malinformation, information essentially that the White House didn't like. And so that piqued everyone's interest, and we began to realize very quickly that there was a coercive and collusive relationship between the White House across a spectrum of federal bureaucratic agencies with their cronies and woke big tech social media corporations.
Here in Missouri, they've partnered with the state of Louisiana to not only challenge the past actions of the Biden administration, but also to get an order to permanently block the government from similar censorship activities, along with a mechanism to monitor and enforce it.
And we have specific emails where the White House is targeting conservative voices and silencing, conservative voices on big tech social media in violation of the First Amendment.
1 News News. 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 1 Ne
This year, on the 4th of July, the judge in the Missouri lawsuit temporarily banned certain federal officials from colluding with social media while the full case was being decided. Judge Terry Doty wrote, "The evidence produced thus far depicts an almost dystopian scenario. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian Ministry of Truth. And although the censorship alleged in this case almost exclusively targeted conservative speech, the issues raised herein go beyond party lines. The right to free speech is not a member of any political party and does not hold any political ideology." A 3-judge federal appeals court recently agreed the Biden administration ran afoul of the First Amendment and blocked the White House, Surgeon General, CDC, and FBI from violating free speech rights by coercing social media companies to take down posts the government doesn't like.
There is an argument where people say social media, they're private companies, they can do what they like, it doesn't amount to censorship. What's your response to that?
Well, we reject that, and certainly the courts have rejected that as well.
The Missouri versus the Biden administration lawsuit continues, with the state seeking a permanent ban of government collusion with social media to censor. For Full Measure, I'm Cheryl Atkinson.
A new episode of Full Measure with Cheryl Atkinson airs this Sunday. Check your local listings for times and channels. Also, don't miss the Full Measure After Hours podcast, available wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And coming up, what we know so far about new actions Texas could take in response to a surge of migrants at the southern border. Stay with us. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America. Amid a surge of migrants crossing the southern border, Texas Governor Greg Abbott says he will include a call for border security legislation in his special session call, expected to start in November. We won't know which topics will be in the call until an official proclamation from Abbott. In a Fox interview this week, he said at least one border-related issue will be on his proclamation related to allegations of a community offering permanent housing specifically to undocumented migrants.
We're going to have legislative hearings that will surface the information about whether or not those allegations are true or not, and if they're true, what we can do to stop it.
The wreckage from Wednesday's crash blocking traffic on Lake Road, where a Wayne Central school bus burst into flames after colliding with a car headed north on Route 250. Volunteer firefighter Steve Gallagher responded to the scene. He is also president of the Wayne Central School District Board of Education.
As I was driving up there, all I could see was the smoke from the fire going up 250, and my stomach sank, fearing the worst.
Students and their chaperones had been on a field trip to Rock Ventures. Gallagher recalls them exiting the bus and gathering a head count. All 22 students and 3 adults were accounted for, but the driver of the car, 73-year-old William Fierstein of Webster, did not survive the crash. Fierstein's dog also died in the accident.
I've seen injured horses, horses with broken legs, emaciated horses, horses that can't walk on all their legs.
An animal auction in Tennessee is back in the hot seat after an animal rescue group released a disturbing video of a horse with part of its intestines hanging out, leading to major protests. USDA citations date back to 2009. A member of the Horse Plus Humane Society says she's calling for stricter animal welfare laws. The USDA says the auction's arena was inspected again this month. The report, we understand, should be out in October. Coming up, how the National Zoo is celebrating its giant pandas before it has to part with these beloved animals. We are back in just 90 seconds. Well, take a look at this. This is the giant panda cam live from the National Zoo here in the nation's capital. You can see the panda sitting right over there, just hanging out. Now, the zoo is saying goodbye to these beloved residents, 3 to be specific, 3 giant pandas that will now make their way back to China. And to celebrate their homegoing and to give panda lovers one last chance to see the animals on U.S. soil, the zoo has been holding a Panda Palooza, a multi-day event for families to enjoy with music and activities and, of course, lots of picture taking. The party goes until October 1st. Now, initially, some concern that the celebrations would be upended by that looming federal shutdown. They were getting a lot of questions about that, but the Smithsonian put out an alert today that said, listen, we've got enough funds to keep all the museums, all Smithsonian museums up and running through at least Saturday, October 7th, which means the fun continues. Thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful night.